So the talk that I'm going to do is actually part of an article that I wrote for the Harvard Ed Review. And so if you want to see the kind of the scholarship piece, you can probably Google search out the article, or if you email me after the talk, I'd be happy to send it to you. But the talk, when I do this talk in the community, I tend to take a little bit of a different angle to also provide, because I'm a professor of ethnic studies. And so one of the things that I've learned as a professor of ethnic studies is how important history is, okay, and how important it is for us to understand our own histories. And this is why Malcolm X said at one point that of all the forms of study, the one that's most likely toward our efforts is the study of history. Okay? And history is one of the subjects, in my own experience, both as a student and as a scholar and as an educator, is one of the subjects that is taught the worst in schools. Okay? And that kids feel particularly disengaged with, particularly the kids who it's most important to understand their own history. So I'm going to start this talk actually with a bit of a history lesson about the person whose work I borrow from a lot in this talk. And that person is actually Tupac Shakur. Okay? And most of you, I'm going to assume, in the room are familiar or have heard of Tupac before. And if you work with young people, you know that even though Pac died in 1996, 16 years later, if you talk to the young people that you work with, I promise you an overwhelming majority of them will still have some Tupac on their iPod, on their phone, on their MP3, whatever, right, however they're engaging with music. And then I challenge you to find anybody else who has not, who passed away in 1996, that, or even later than that, that has that level of impact still on our young people. And so, as a scholar, as a community member, as a teacher, there's something about Pac's message that I wanted to understand at a much deeper level, because there's something about the things that he's saying and the ways that he's saying them that is really resonating with our young people, particularly the young people that are the most disengaged in school, particularly the young people that we claim to be the most concerned about because of the way in which they're engaging the streets. Okay? And yet we don't spend enough time really trying to understand what is it that's engaging them. Why is that engaging them in that way? And how can we use that engagement as a way to redirect them in a way that's not only going to be beneficial for them, but that's going to be beneficial for us as a community. So I start with Pac because he's one of those folks that is deeply engaging our young people. And as a scholar, I started really trying to understand more about Pac, right, and sort of his own sensibilities. And part of what I found in my research is how much Pac valued his own name. Okay? And Pac was named after this dude, okay, Tupac Amaru. And Tupac Amaru was the last Incan king. Right? So first of all, if you've got black raza beef, if you've got black-brown beef in your communities, in your schools, okay, this squashes it off top, okay? Because here's Pac, right, a real popular cultural black icon, urban icon, right, who's named, right, after a Latino, right, which, and I'm a raza studies professor, so I'm fairly critical of that term, right, because we're not Latin, okay? But, for lack of a better term, right, it's better than Hispanic, and we can talk about why that is. But yeah, it's a rough life. Analysis paralysis, right? So Pac is named after, right, an Incan king, right? And Pac was very much connected to the meaning of that because of who Tupac Amaru was. Right, so Tupac Amaru, when the Spanish and the Portuguese came, right, and were trying to steal the land and steal the wealth of these communities, and they came across Tupac Amaru, they found something that they had never imagined they would see, right, which was a community that was so tight-knit, okay, and a massive community that was so tight-knit, and that had a leader that just by standing in front of the people, right? Because he was so connected to the people, could change the entire sort of spirit and sentiment of the community just through his words. And so they were really concerned about Tupac Amaru. Like they saw him as the sort of linchpin for if they could find a way to crush his spirit, that's how they would defeat the Incan Empire. Okay? And so the way that they chose to do that was through public humiliation. So they captured Pac, and they brought him into what was their equivalent of their Zocalo, or their like town square. And they tortured him very publicly, okay, as a way to say to the people that we've taken your most powerful leader, your most powerful icon, and we're going to sort of deconstruct him in front of you as a way to show you how much power we have and how little power you have to resist us. Right? Now, this, of course, is precisely what was also done to African communities by colonizers. Right? And there's an interesting sort of fictional analysis of this that's really hot. Right? So if you really want to get into these issues with young people and families in our community, just be ready to really get into some hot stuff, because colonialism, right, was not cute. Right? Colonialism was brutal. Okay? And it was rape. And it was theft. Okay? And those are some of the bedrock principles on which the foundation that we are currently standing on stand upon. Okay? So let's acknowledge that we are on indigenous land right now. Okay? That we have built this community on top of another community. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and take a wild guess and say that that is not a central part of the history that is taught in this community. Okay? And that's a problem. Okay? That we are so ahistorical in this country. Okay? And yet, at the same time, not a person in this room would buy a house without first inspecting its foundation. Okay? And this is the foundation on which this country was built. Right? It was built, the economy was built on slave labor. The economy was built on stolen land. Right? The economy was built on indigenous genocide. And so understanding the way in which that foundation that we stand on then affects the whole building, okay, affects the whole structure in which we're operating in schools. If we don't go back and really deal with that foundation, then we're not teaching history at all. Okay? So when you look at Pac, okay, and their understanding that this is critical to expunge leader, okay, his last words before they killed him in front of the community were this. And what's interesting to me about these words is that there's no bitterness there. Right? There's no vengeance there. That it's an acknowledgement of him returning to his origin, right? Back to the earth, right? And asking the earth to bear witness to what was happening. Okay? Now, in 1589, after they had killed Amaru, there was a conqueror in Peru who was about to die. And as he was about to die, his conscience began to overwhelm him because he began to realize what they had done to this society. And so he called a scribe, and he asked this person to take down his last will and testament. Okay, and this is the real value of teaching history. One of the things that annoys me about how we teach history in schools is we don't use original documents. Okay, that we use interpretations of original documents. And if you talk to any historian, so we're not raising historians, we're teaching history. Right? But if you're raising historians, if you're really developing historians, then do it the way historians do it, which is they go back to original documents. Okay? And the original documents are often very telling. Okay? They're not PC. Okay? They're not filtered. Okay? They're not filtered for social justice. Right? It's like, this is how it was. And so, in his will and testament, okay, there is the opening section, okay, is this. And I'm going to break down a little bit of it for you. So, the opening of the will and testament is, we found these kingdoms in such good order, and the said Incas governed them in such wise manner. Can I open that a little bit? There we go. that throughout them there was not a thief, nor a vicious man, nor an adulteress, nor was a bad woman admitted among them, nor were there immoral people. Okay? This is who we come from. Right? These are our antepasados. These are our ancestors that we need to be teaching young people about. These are the civilizations that we come from, that were destroyed by colonizers, which then built, right, this 21st century foundation where we have thieves, okay, and vicious people and immoral people. Okay? But if you don't understand who you come from, then you begin to think that it's always been this way. Okay? And you norm it in a way that you stop even questioning it and you just figure out how you're going to get in to fit in. Okay? And this is the problem with the way that we teach our young people. We don't teach them who they really are. We don't teach them who they really come from. And I'm not just talking about black and brown kids. I'm talking about white kids too. Right? Most white kids in this country don't know their real origins. Okay? That they're immigrants. Right? Immigrants from where? What's their original land? What's their indigenous language? Right? We're all settlers in this land, short of the original indigenous people. Okay? And we need to be more honest about that so people really understand who they are and the way that we all connect. Now, he goes on to say, the motive which obliges me to make this statement is the discharge of my conscience as I find myself guilty. For we have destroyed by our evil example. Right? Now, mind you, right, this is not an interpretation of the colonizer's perspective. This is an actual colonizer's will and testament, right, on his deathbed. And as they often say, right, there's no lies between dead men. Right? That one of the most honest moments in your life is right before you check out. Because ain't no need to lie no more. He goes on to write, they were so free, they, the Incas, were so free from the committal of crimes or excesses as well, men as women, that the Indian who had 100,000 pesos worth of gold or silver in his house left it open, merely placing a small stick against the door as a sign that its master was out. With that, according to their custom, no one can enter or take anything that was there. Okay. Now, I live on the 3400 block of East Oakland. I can imagine a situation where I simply put a stick against my door and keep it pushing. Okay? But, right, it's so deep to me to know that this is my people. Right? This is who I come from. We've regressed. We've regressed. We call this an advanced civilization, but to me, like, iPhone is dope. Like, that's an advancement. Okay? But if I got to keep my iPhone on lock and key, I mean, I just walked up here today and seen some kid get their iPhone jacked. And I'm thinking to myself, not only the kid that got their iPhone jacked, but the kid that did the jacking doesn't even understand who they come from. That what they just did is totally disconnected from their own ancestral heritage. Right? But because that's been normed, that's how kids begin to act in the norm. And that's why it's so important for us to begin to educate young people about who we really are. Okay? He ends by saying, when they saw that we put locks and keys on our doors, they found that we had thieves among us, and men who sought to make their daughters commit sin, they despised us. Okay? So it's an interesting inversion of history, isn't it? Right? That now the victor, okay, was the one committing the sin. And those who had their land stolen, right, were the ones who were pure of heart and conscience. Right? A total inversion of the story, right, that I was told for a small part of my elementary school years when I was in Catholic school. Okay? When I heard all about how, they saved us. Right? So that's who Pac comes from. Now, the interesting thing is most kids who listen to Pac don't know this. Right? They don't know the real history of Pac's name, even in the way that Pac knew his own name. Okay? So this is especially important for those of you, right, who are engaging with young people all the time, to not be dismissive of their culture, to not be dismissive of youth culture. Don't make the same mistakes that were made about you. You remember what they used to say about you when you were 16? And how your music was, devil music? Right? And it was ruining everything, and It's the same thing we say now. Okay? It's the same thing that's always been said about youth culture. Because what youth culture does is it pushes edges. Okay? And it makes adults really uncomfortable because the older you get, the more conservative you get. Right? And the safer you want to play it. Right? So acknowledge the fact that in youth culture, right, there are real historical lessons there that can change the way that young people see themselves. Now, Pac, as a result of this, engaged in a certain kind of work, which is what I think is so engaging for young people. So for those of you that are not familiar with Pac's work, he has a book of poetry. And if you work with kids that don't like to read, start there. Okay, just buy Pac's book of poetry. And kids will dive into it. And that's actually the title of the book of poetry. It's also the title of one of Tupac's poems, okay, that he read on the top of multiple audio tracks. And the one that's probably the most well-known is an audio track called Mama's Just a Little Girl. Okay, and at the end of that song, he reads this poem. So I'm actually going to play the end of the song right now as a way to kind of frame this talk that I'm going to do today. Okay, so what is really profound about Pac's metaphor to me is that for me, this metaphor most profoundly captures the work that we're trying to do. This idea of growing roses in concrete. Right? And if you really begin to understand what's going on in young people's lives, then what you begin to see is that the ways in which the material conditions of their lives affect them before they even step foot in school, okay, are largely ignored in schools. Okay? And that's for a number of reasons. Right? One of which is that most of the people that are teaching our kids are not from the community. Right? So they don't understand the concrete. But the second reason for that is because that schools have often taken this position that what happens out there is what happens out there, and we have no responsibility for that. Okay? And that once they get inside the doors, then they're our responsibility, and then when the final bell rings, then they're somebody else's responsibility. And my only thing to schools about that is how's that going for you? You know, it's not going well, right? And it's not going well because that's not an effective paradigm to create an educational system, right? Now, Pac's metaphor, right, is essentially the same thing that my mother taught me, okay? And that I would bet many of the mothers in this room have taught their own children. So, how many of you, show of hands, are the youngest from a large family? Okay, so you all will feel my pain on this one. Okay, thank you, young lady. You as well. You're the youngest in a large family? No, Mom's shaking her head like, no, hell no. There's only two of us. She is the youngest. You're right. Large is all relative. Okay, so I'm the youngest of 7. Okay, so as the youngest of 7 kids, I often felt like it was my birthright to complain. Okay, about everything, because I never got nothing. Okay, at least I never got nothing new. Okay, so my mother, I was meeting with a group of principals earlier today, and I was telling this story that my mother used to do this thing where she would take shoes. Okay, so my brother would get some shoes, and he was a year older than me. Okay, so he'd get some shoes, and he'd wear those shoes until they didn't fit no more, and then my mother would keep the box with the tissue paper and everything. Okay. And when they didn't fit him no more, then they would take the box, or she would take the shoes and she would repackage them in the box, and she would wrap it up, and she'd put a little wrapping paper on it, right? And she'd give them to me, okay? And I'd be like, Ma, like, I ain't no sucker, like I know these are his shoes, like I live with dude, I see him walking around every day, like, right? And I was like, Mom, could I just one time have some new shoes? And she goes, those are new. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Those are not new. Those are his shoes. And she goes, well, they're new to you. Okay, so I felt like it was my birthright as a result of these sorts of events to complain about everything. Okay? And my mother one time, I'm complaining, I don't even remember what I was complaining about, and she stops me in the middle of my rant. She sits me down at the kitchen table. She goes in the kitchen and she takes a cup and a glass and she fills it halfway. And she sits down at the table, puts the glass between us, and points at the glass and says, half full or half empty? Okay. And of course, it's a trick question, right? Because it's both. And she says to me, son, how you choose to answer that question is how you will live your life. Because your life will always be both half full and half empty. And if you choose to see your life as half empty, if you choose to see your life for all the things that you don't have, you will never fill your cup. But if you can see your life as half full, if you can identify the things that you do have in your life, you will fill your cup, it will overflow, and you can share that with others. Now, I believe that this is precisely Tupac's message to us. That we choose whether or not we see young people for their damaged petals or their tenacity and their will to reach the sun. We choose whether or not we see young people as half full or half empty. Okay? Because they're all both, just like us. Okay? We're all half full and half empty. Right? Now, I grew up in the concrete, so I have damaged petals. And I wear those damaged petals on my arms in ink. So that every morning when I get out of the shower and I look in the mirror, right, I remember who I am and who I came from. Right? But schools always told me that I had to check that ink at the door. That there was no place in the schoolhouse for me to talk about my damaged petals. Right? That in fact, what schools would tell me and what teachers would tell me was those damaged petals that were getting in my way. Right? And the reason that young people love Pac so much is because what Pac tells young people is, nah. Those damaged petals are your strength. Those damaged petals are what make you the kind of rose that you are. Right? And what I see in you is not your damaged petals, but your tenacity and your will to reach the sun. Because I know what it's like to grow in the concrete. It's hard growing there. Okay? The concrete is perhaps the worst environment in which you can attempt to grow. It's devoid of light. It's devoid of key nutrients. It's devoid of water. And on top of all that, it's toxic. And yet we know that every single day, young people still grow in the concrete. Right? They still batter their way up through the crack. And somehow as schools, we've lost track of that. Somehow as schools, unless that rose is growing up perfectly straight with no damaged petals, then that's not really a rose. And we begin to rationalize how that ain't no rose, that's a weed. Okay? And weeds are messing up the rose garden. Okay? And the reason that Pac's message resonates so profoundly with so many young people that are disenfranchised in schools and the broader society is because Pac sees them as glasses half full. And as my mother said, okay, unless we can begin to start seeing all of our young people as glasses half full, those cups will never fill. But it won't be the fault of the cup. Okay? It won't be the fault of the rose. Right? It is that age-old adage that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay? And so it's really about us shifting our own lens about how we see the young people. Can we identify their tenacity and their will to reach the sun and use that as leverage to begin to move them in the direction that we know is a much better direction for them? Right? Now, in order to do that, we have to really understand the concrete. Okay? And I apologize, I'm going to jump back real quick because I want everybody to have access to this. So, of all the things I've read, all the lectures I've been to, all the research I've done, nothing has more profoundly impacted my understanding of the concrete than this film series. Okay? It's a 7-part film series by PBS called Unnatural Causes. And I don't care who you are, where you land in the spectrum, that everybody, right, from your cousin on the corner to your university-based researcher, to your everyday classroom teacher, to your principal, everyone in our communities should be watching this film series together. Okay, to really understand the ways in which the concrete is real in our lives and the way it affects our bodies. It is a very accessible film series for everyday folk. Okay? And it has a great website with tons of resources for teachers, right, for parents, so that you can begin to start identifying the ways in which the toxicity of the concrete is affecting the babies in our community. Okay? And you. Because if you walking around on the concrete, if you live in the concrete, you are also experiencing those toxins. Now, what you'll find is that the concrete is deep, it's multi-layered, it's complex. Right? And I don't have time to go through all of the layers today. The one that I'm going to focus on in particular is one that's particularly profound in my community, and I know it's profound in this community because I've been walking around this community for the last 90 minutes or so, right? Reiko gave me a nice walkthrough, and it doesn't take me long to see the signs. Okay? I know y'all are dealing with 18th Street here. Okay? And that's the set my sister used to bang, right? So that's how I know the signs, right? Brother, I appreciate the shirt that you gave me, okay? But I can't wear that shirt in my neighborhood, okay? Because I'm from a red hood. So he gave me a nice blue shirt with this. So you might have to switch me out to a red one, okay? Pink is good. Pink is neutral, bro. I can wear pink anywhere, okay? So it's little things like this, right? Knowing that when I'm putting together T-shirts for our program, I can't give my kids no blue T-shirt. Right, you get blazed over something like this. Just slipping, just coming out of the house and not even thinking. Right? And so just walking around your community for the last 90 minutes, I see the signs. What we're dealing with in our community, y'all are also dealing with in your community. Right? So I'm going to go a little deeper on that, on physical violence and how it impacts young people and families. But before I do, I want to also acknowledge some of the other bullets that are up here. Okay? Like the second one, racism. That for all the folks, and I would doubt very seriously that there's anyone in this room or very few people in this room who take the position that we're now in a post-racial society. Just given the fact that you here listening to me on Friday at 4:30, I'm going to go ahead and guess that you understand that racism is real. Okay? But there's actually really hard medical evidence to support that. Right? So when you're beginning to move these ideas in institutions and with people who disagree with you, right, let the evidence lead. Right? The debate is over. Right? There is no debate about whether or not we're in a post-racial society. There is simply no medical evidence to suggest that. There is, however, boatloads of medical evidence that are very crystal clear that racism is not only real, it's alive in the society, and it's toxic, and it's killing people. And we can measure it. Okay? We can measure shifts in biomarkers in the body as the direct result of exposure to toxic racism. Okay. What we can also measure now is the ways in which chronic exposure to toxic racism actually alters DNA. Okay. Now, think about the historical significance of that for peoples of African descent and indigenous descent who experienced colonialism and enslavement. Right? What does that mean for current generations of people who are descendants of those folks? What does that mean, right, for their DNA? If DNA markers shift as the result of exposure to toxic racism, what happens when a DNA marker shifts and I have children? It's passed. Okay? So there is now clear evidence that generational trauma is being passed by family members to family members. And the longer it goes untreated, the more that trauma affects the body. Okay? So this has, you're talking about, we're not even talking about financial reparations. Right? We're talking about real physical health results that are still in our communities as the result of things that happened 7, 8, 10 generations ago. Okay? For the brothers in the room, okay, deeply sorry, but there is hard medical evidence that patriarchy is real. Okay? And that not only is it real, but it is creating poor health in the women in our societies as a direct result of our unwillingness to really confront our own male privilege. Okay? So it's multi-layered, right? There is all sorts of intersection that's happening, right, in the concrete. So you're not just being affected by one layer of the concrete, you're being affected by it all. And you need to understand that because even if you're not Even if you're a man, right? If the sisters in the community are not healthy and you understand that you live in a micro ecosystem, then their poor health then affects your health. Okay? That we're all interconnected, right? And to the degree that we don't start teaching that more explicitly in schools, which means getting away from this narrative about if you have the answers on a test, you can't share it with me because it's cheating. This is absurd. And in fact, it's actually the opposite of what we teach kids in kindergarten, right? So we're undoing the things we teach them at a young age, which is if you got extra crayons, share, dog. Don't hog the crayons, right? That's selfish, right? But now I've got knowledge, right? And I'm sitting next to my community member that I love, that I'm a ride or die for, and the school, the institution is telling me that if I share my crayons, I'm cheating. Okay? Oh, but it's not, I don't mean crayons. If I share my knowledge of calculus, I'm cheating. So we can share crayons but not calculus, right? Under the auspices of some like intellectual rigor, right? And the idea of meritocracy and individual achievement, right? We've got to start seriously questioning what is the purpose of school in a society, right? And if that purpose is to create a healthier society, then we've got to start unpacking some of our most basic presumptions about what we're norming in schools, right? Now, violence in my community, right, is one of the most profound factors in the concrete. In 2006, the San Francisco Chronicle became so concerned with homicide in East Oakland, or in Oakland proper, that they started mapping it. And they said that we had the plague, right? Which is interesting because, as I told y'all, I live in East Oakland. Okay? I live right about there. Okay? And if we had the plague, guess what? Okay? Y'all are in trouble. Okay? Because funny thing about the plague is it's the ultimate non-discriminator, isn't it? It doesn't recognize race, doesn't recognize class, it doesn't recognize gender, and it sure doesn't recognize political boundaries. Right? Those are the city limits of Oakland. Right? The interesting thing about our plague is it appears to be quarantined. Right? And it has been quarantined between the 580 and the 880 freeways. This is what's known as the lower bottoms or the flatlands. Okay, this is where I live. This is where I've taught for the last 20 years. And everybody in this room knows who lives there, whether you've ever been to Oakland or not. Okay? And you also know who lives there. Okay? Piedmont. Right? Piedmont is a city inside of our city. There is no way into Piedmont or out of Piedmont without dealing with us. Even if you got a helicopter, right? We see you. You're like in our airspace, Piedmont. You come back through, we see you again. Okay? And no way, right, into that city or out of it without dealing with us. So you tell me, what the hell is going on in Piedmont where they have completely opted out of the plague? They're just like, no, don't want any. Right? Cornel West jokes about the fact that Disneyland brags that nobody's ever died on their premises. He says somebody probably has, and they just push them across the line to keep their record clean. Right? Well, what's going on right there? Right? You know, Piedmont was like, oh, hell, that's Oakland. Right? So, right, in 5 years, this plague unfolds in our community, and we have 555 homicides. Okay? This is a city of 400,000 people. Okay? In 2007, the Chronicle gave up and the Oakland Tribune started mapping homicides. And they did that for the next 4 years. The 2011 homicide map will come out very soon. And as you can see, there's been almost no change. Right? So I decided that I would update the homicide map. Okay? And I'm going to do it for 13 years. Because that's how many years young people are actually in school. Right? K to 12. This is 8 years. This kid hasn't even made it to our high school class yet. And you show me where can a child live in our community where they have not personally witnessed homicide, if not multiple homicides. But what are the conversations about in schools? Test scores, right? College-going culture, right? Homework. Right? Nothing to deal with the real material conditions about what's really going on in kids' lives. Right? Those can be dealt with later or just left at the door. Right? Now, we know from the research that this exposure to this kind of toxic chronic stress results in PTSD. But the problem is that most of the conversations about PTSD have a focus on this dude, right? Which is right, because soldiers are particularly prone to PTSD, right? But nobody's talking about these brothers. Okay? These are my students. This is me on the camera. And this is us burying another one of my students. Okay? 16 years old, stabbed more than a dozen times in the face with a screwdriver, okay? About 4 blocks from my house. Okay? And this is who came to his funeral. And the next day, these young brothers were back at school. And what was school talking about? Okay? Test scores, attendance, homework. Right? Which is a morally bankrupt position to take. Everybody knows it, but everybody's doing it. Okay? It's normed in schools. And so it becomes normed for kids to not value their own lives or the lives of the people that actually look like them, because shit, schools don't value our lives. The government doesn't value our lives. And this country doesn't value our lives. Now, you might think that's a bit hyperbolic for me to say, right? But let's look at it, because we actually have a counterexample. Columbine. About 12 years ago in Columbine, Colorado, a predominantly white, very wealthy community in Colorado, okay? There was a multiple student school shooting. And the national response was, this is a crisis. Okay? And if you go back and you actually listen to the language that was used to describe Columbine, right, they said things like, this isn't supposed to happen here. Okay? Now, what's the code there? What's the unstated statement? Right. Yeah, it's supposed to happen somewhere else, just not here. And that's what makes it a national crisis. You know what that is described as by sociologists? That's described as a social caste state, also known as apartheid, okay? Where you have a bimodal society where some people deserve safety, some people, right, deserve quality schools. Some people deserve safe streets. Some people deserve humanity. Right? And some people don't. That the lives of some babies matter more than the lives of others. Okay? And that, okay, is a society that can't keep itself together. We won't last on that train. Okay? Because it's a morally bankrupt position. And schools play a critical role in maintaining and norming that, or in disrupting that. Okay? There is no neutral ground, okay, in such a morally critical issue. There is no neutral ground. You must take a stand. Right? Howard Zinn said once, the famous historian, who wrote the People's History of the United States. He also wrote the Children's History of the United States. Zinn said once, I never want my students to leave my classroom wondering where I stand on the issues that we talk about. And yet, there's this whole narrative about somehow education being objective, being neutral. There is no such thing, okay, as a neutral education. Right? Every decision we make about what to include is also a decision about what to exclude, okay? So let's be 100% honest about that, right? That we are making very clear political statements by what we teach our kids every day, right? And what we norm as the school rules. The best book I've read on how to really begin to understand how this affects our babies is this book by Bruce Perry, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. Right? Bruce Perry is widely considered the leading national expert on child trauma. Okay? This book also really well written, very accessible for everyday folks. I don't have a medical background, right? But I could read this book, and two things happened for me when I read this book. First of all, for me, as a young person who experienced some real trauma growing up, okay, this book shook me. Because I started reading about these kids who had experienced similar traumas in their lives. And Bruce Perry is breaking down the ways in which their actions became symptomatic of untreated trauma. okay? And I saw myself in the book. Okay? And I saw things that I had done growing up, okay? And that I had hated myself for, that I thought were internal flaws in myself. Okay? And what they really were, they were manifestations of untreated trauma. Okay? But I also saw my students in this book. And that's the part that crushed me. Because when I read these narratives of these young people, and I saw the things that they were doing, and let's be clear, when you act on trauma, okay, it's not conscious, right? It's a biological imperative. You're not controlling it. Your body, right, is attempting to respond to the trauma that you're feeling. And what I saw in this book was I saw the students that I teach. And I realized how many times I had done harm as a teacher. Because I knew what was going on in kids' lives. But you know, you're in that moment and you make decisions as a teacher, right, in a heartbeat. Okay? And in those moments, instead of reading that trauma, okay, and part of this is because I didn't have the right training. Right? I didn't know how to read PTSD. Right? I thought kid was just being a knucklehead just like I was. Right? And so when you punish that trauma, right, it exacerbates the trauma. It actually makes it worse. Right? But if you can't read the symptoms of PTSD, then you will end up making those same mistakes. Okay? And the same happens at home, y'all. Okay? Moms would flip out on me sometimes, right, over some stuff that she was reading as bad behavior, right? And she was raising me the way she had been raised, right? But our bodies were carrying this trauma generation to generation, and to the degree that also in the homes with our own babies, we can begin to understand the ways in which our trauma contributes to our baby's trauma, okay? And then it becomes cyclical inside of that ecosystem, right? That's also critical. Now, these are actually the symptoms of PTSD from a medical index. Now, when you look at those symptoms and you think schools, tell me what the diagnosis is. ADD and ADHD. So for every parent that is in this room right now whose child has been diagnosed as ADD and ADHD, okay, if you live in an environment like the one that I'm talking about, okay, it is worth your time to get a second opinion. Right? But you're going to have to go to somebody who has expertise in trauma. Right? Now, according to Bruce Perry, right, 40%, okay, upwards of 40% of the diagnoses of urban youth in schools with ADD and ADHD are actually medical misdiagnoses. Because they don't have ADD or ADHD. What do they have? Okay, they have PTSD. Okay? And in fact, what the data actually says is that 1 in 3 urban youth display the symptoms of mild to severe PTSD. 1 in 3. And when they compared that to the military data, what they found is that urban youth are actually twice as likely as a soldier returning from Iraq to have PTSD. So if you were teaching soldiers that were returning from Iraq, one of the first things that you would train yourself on is how to recognize the symptoms of PTSD. Right? And yet there is almost no training in urban schools for how teachers and principals can begin to recognize PTSD. And yet urban students are twice as likely as soldiers returning from Iraq. Again, this is our unwillingness to be really honest about what's going on in our communities. And so because we can't be honest about what's really going on, we can't actually do anything about it in a way that's really responsive to the needs of the community. Now, what Harvard's School of Public Health found was that PTSD doesn't even work as a diagnosis. Okay? And the reason it doesn't work is because what does PTSD stand for? Post-traumatic stress disorder, which is accurate for a soldier because the soldier leaves the battlefield. Right? Right? But young people, they go back to it, okay? And so Harvard School of Public Health in 2011 released this diagnosis. They said PTSD isn't even an accurate diagnosis for what we're seeing in urban youth. Right? What we're actually seeing is CPTSD. It's more complex than the kind of PTSD we see in soldiers. Because young people are returning to the battlefield time and again. Now, they kept post, so it's complex post-traumatic stress. Right? I changed post to prolonged because I think post is still an inaccurate diagnosis. That it's prolonged, it's perpetual, so I'm okay with the P. Okay? But I think we got to choose a word that more accurately reflects what's actually happening to our babies in the community. Okay, this is the concrete, y'all. Right? And I have a talk, there's research this clear on all of these bullets. Right? So there's a lot of work to be done. My advice is start with the ones that are most profoundly impacting your community, your block, your school. Right? Drill down there. Get really good at addressing those things in your space and then move to another one. Do not become the jack of all trades and the master of none. Okay? These kinds of toxins are deep and they require deep treatments, and deep treatments require deep knowledge. Right? So pick a bullet, okay, and start working on it. Now, here's what actually happens in the body, and this is for everybody in this room, particularly if you live in these communities. Right? This is what's going on in your body, and it's important that you're able to acknowledge and recognize when these things are happening, because it's a lot healthier for you if you're actually aware of when it's happening, because you can respond differently. So, the threat to health, the biggest threat to health, is, according to David Williams at Harvard School of Public Health, is the accumulation of multiple negative stressors without the resources to cope. Okay, now just let that sit in for a second. Multiple negative stressors, no resources to cope. Who's that describe? Okay. That describes the kids that are doing the worst in school. I guarantee you the kids that are doing the worst in school in your community have multiple negative stressors in their life, and they have very few resources, if any, to cope with them. Okay. Now, what that does is it increases what the medical field refers to as your allostatic load. Okay. Here's what that actually looks like. So this is the top one is a normal stress response. Okay. And let's be clear. There is no such thing as a stress-free life. Okay? Everyone has stress. Okay? If you do not have stress, you are dead. Okay? So your goal should not be to pursue a stress-free life. Okay? Stress is a natural part of the human condition. We've always had stress, and because of that, stress is actually good for the body. Okay? So here's what happens in your body during a normal stress event. Right? So, let's say, the one I used earlier with the principles was, let's say you're trying to ask somebody out on a date. Okay? And you going for it. Okay? And if you're married, plug your ears, because you can't do this. Okay? But so I'm the presenter and I am married, so I can just talk about it in the third person like, somebody else that was doing this. Okay? So, you're going to ask somebody out on a date. Okay? And it's, you really want this one to happen. And so when you step right to the ask, what's going on in your heart? Yeah, okay. So it's jumping out the chest. And you're hoping she does not notice that it's jumping out your chest, because then you don't look as cool. Okay, because that would be kind of weird if you saw that, huh? You'd probably instant no. Okay? So, right? So you make this, and your heart is going, and that's this. Okay? That's activity in your body. Okay? And you do not control that. I don't care how smooth you are. Right? If you are really feeling the stress of the moment, your body kicks in. Right? And what it kicks in is, it kicks in a set of chemicals like adrenaline. Okay? And the chemical that they're the most concerned with in the medical field right now is something called cortisol. Everyone in this room needs to know what cortisol is. Okay? And you need to start understanding how cortisol is produced in your body. And this is why. Okay? The medical field has now linked cortisol to the overrepresentation of the 4 big unnatural killers in poor and working class communities and communities of color. Okay? So in poor working class communities and communities of color, we are overwhelmingly overrepresented in 4 unnatural forms of death. Can you name them? Okay, high blood pressure, known as hypertension. Okay, somebody said diabetes, right? And it's not diabetes. Okay, it's type 2 diabetes. Okay, which used to be known as, it actually currently is known as adult onset diabetes. Right? But now the medical field is beginning to rethink that because why? Because kids are getting it. They never used to see type 2 diabetes in kids. Okay? And that's another issue we can get at during the dialogue about what they feed us, right, in schools. Okay? They don't get that nice Indian food during, I don't know, maybe, I don't know where the principal go. Right? You have that, nah, cafeteria food, huh? Yep. Okay. So we are literally contributing, right, to type 2 diabetes in our babies based on what we feed them in schools. Okay? So what's the third one? So we got hypertension, type 2 diabetes. Okay? Heart disease. Okay? Not stroke. Cancer. The big C. Okay? Those are the big four, right? And folks of color and poor folks are overrepresented in stroke, but I'm talking about the big four killers. Okay? And this is not a U.S. phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. In every part of the globe, there is an overrepresentation of people of color and poor people in those four unnatural diseases. And what the medical field has linked that to directly is the overproduction of cortisol. And do you know when you overproduce cortisol? When you are under toxic stress. Okay? Toxic stress is one of the biggest killers in the world. Okay? And the leading cause of toxic stress? Inequality. Okay? Any form of inequality is the leading cause of toxic stress. Right? So if we want a healthier society, reduce inequality. Barack. Okay? Health care, cool. But when do you need health care? When you're already sick. Okay? And sickness is the absence of health. Okay? To have a healthy society, you've got to look at the things that prevent poor health. Health care matters for sure. Okay? But what's more important for long-term health is building a healthy society. Right? So in your ask, okay, so don't be thinking like, oh, no, I can't ask anybody out because I'm going to kill myself. Toxic stress. Okay? Nah. Toxic stress is caused when your dumbass cheats on your partner. Okay? That's the toxic stress. Actually asking somebody out, normal stress response. Okay? Good for you. Okay? It's good for you. This is, see, because this, I'm on camera, so this is going to go out, and my wife's going to see this, and she's going to be like, this is how you stay married, y'all. You got to always keep her on your mind. Okay? I love you, baby. Okay, so you have this stress moment, right? And then this activity happens, and that's this spike you see, okay? This is on the y-axis here, you see physiological response, okay? So the physiological response is, bam, you kick in all this adrenaline, you kick in all this cortisol so that you can make it through the stress, okay? And during stress moments, your body actually performs at a higher level. Okay, so you can tell this to your kids when they're like, you're stressing me out, and like, I'm actually helping you perform at a higher level, okay? Okay? And the reason why is, like, when you're under stress, you're actually faster. Okay? You are physically faster, right? You're physically stronger, and you have better memory. Okay? Because that's how your body, right, over the course of human development, has been able to survive, like, stress moments. Now, after the ask happens, okay, and it's yes or no, right? Doesn't matter, and you're pulling away from the stress moment, right? Does your heart just go back to normal? No, right? It takes a little while. You got to get some distance, and you're like, yeah, I did it, right? And then slowly, right, you recover. Okay? And eventually your heart gets back to normal. And that's the recovery period. That is a normal stress response. Okay? But that's not what we're talking about. That's not what's happening in our kids' lives. Okay? What's going on in our kids' bodies looks like that. Okay? These are maladaptive responses to stress. These are toxic stress, and these kill kids. So when I work with middle school and high school teachers, I like to use this one. Okay? And I tell them it kind of works like this for the kids. First period, second period, third period, fourth period, fifth period. Okay? And what do you notice about the slope on the left and the right side of each of those inverted V's compared to that slope? Okay. It's much sharper. It's much steeper. On which side? Both sides. That's toxic stress. That's what kills you. You bounce from stress moment to stress moment. Intense influx of chemicals, no recovery time. Back into your next stress moment, right? In athletics, we refer to this as interval training. Okay? And if you've done interval training, what you know is you get exhausted really fast because it's really intense. Okay? And what happens over the course of kids' lives is they move through these different kinds, right, of adaptive responses to toxic stress. Right? And eventually, okay, they can get to this one. Right? And this is the one that's known as inadequate response. This is the kid, right, who sees somebody getting beat up, sees like a really intense, violent situation and starts laughing. Right? Or has no affect. Right? Because they're so maladapted to toxic stress they can't even respond anymore. Their stress response system has completely shut down. That kid is dying. Okay? They're dying. Their body is shutting down because your stress response system is your most basic human system. Right? It is the most important system in the body because if you don't have response to stress anymore, right, you're not going to live very long. Right? Because it's that key moment that lets you read, right, dangerous situations and get out of them. Right? And if you don't have that anymore, you keep putting yourself in these dangerous situations until it's a wrap. And what happens as a result of this is this induces a process called weathering. Right? And this is my favorite description of how this happens. And it's by a woman named Arlene Geronimus, who's a professor at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Okay? And there's this great article. You can get this online. Okay? The journal is Miller McCune, and the article is called Racism's Hidden Toll. Okay? And it's a great article written in sort of everyday language about her work. And she's particularly interested about the intersections of toxic stress. So she looks specifically at how toxic stress affects black women and how both racism and patriarchy intersect to create this really toxic environment for black women's health. Okay? And what she describes it is as weathering. And what she says is essentially that everybody, if you're a person of color or if you're born into poverty, that when you come into this world, you're in a fight. Okay? You don't choose the fight. That's just the reality. You in a fight. Okay? And because your body is highly adaptive, you come out knowing how to fight. Right? Now, if you've ever been in a fight before, when that fight's about to jump off, what do you protect? Okay, you protect your face and as much of your body as you can, right? You probably taught to get in a good position, good athletic position, right? And you're going to protect this, right? Now, I'm not talking about you fighting Mike Tyson, okay? Because if you fight Tyson, what happens? Yeah, it's one and done, okay? It's a one-hitter quitter and then you collect your $5 million, okay? I'm talking about you fighting a true pugilist, okay? A true master of the sweet science. And so you come out and you're up here, you're protecting all this, and so where do they attack? Okay. They attack down in the body, right? They get in the kidneys, right? But you cool because you work out at 24. So you got, you got it all locked up and you taking body blow and you taking body blow and you getting yours in. Okay? And it happens, right, year after year after year. Body blow, body blow, body blow, body blow, body blow. And eventually, right, what starts to happen to your hands? Okay. They start to drop. And then what happens? Okay. Then you get cancer. Then you get type 2 diabetes. Okay. That's how toxic stress destroys the body. And the problem is the narrative about racism, the narrative about patriarchy, the narrative about all these things is they're like these massive global events in your life. Some white folks show up to your house with some white hoods on and some white capes, and they plant a white cross, and they light that on fire with white fire, and then, that's some racist. Okay? That's not how racism works. Okay? Racism is institutionalized, right? It's a body blow, it's a body blow, it's a body blow. Sociologists refer to these as microaggressions. Okay? And over the course of your life, that's what creates toxicity in your body. And the problem with that is you can't see it. Okay? Kids are not going to show up with the little sign around them that says, I'm stressed. Okay? But they are carrying that in their bodies. And so are the parents that you're working with. Okay? And so if you don't understand that, right, then you don't really understand how to respond, right, and how to provide an education that's actually meaningful and responsive to the material conditions of their life. So this is kind of where people are at this point. Now my mother, she's 82 years old, 83. And she's recently discovered email, which means that I get daily updates on how Jesus is doing. So, I know when he's risen, I know when he's dead, I know when his birthday is. Right? And so, my brother, the one whose shoes I always have to wear, okay, I did this talk at Harvard a couple years ago. And so my mom was all excited. She's going around the neighborhood telling everybody, oh, my baby boy's going to Harvard, blah, 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 right? And people are like, lady, I don't even know you. Like, can you back up a little bit? And my brother finds out that Harvard put the talk on YouTube. So he calls my mom up and he's like, his talk is on YouTube. I'm going to email you the link and you can go on and watch it. So my mom's like, all right. So she calls me and she says, your brother just sent me the link to your talk at Harvard on YouTube. I'm going to go on and watch it and I'm going to call you back and I'm going to tell you what I thought. And I'm like, come on. She's my mom. So I'm like, all right, cool, Ma. So about 90 minutes later, she calls me back. And I'm like, so, what'd you think? It's like dead air. Yeah. She goes, I think you curse too much. So the cool thing about my mom, though, is she doesn't text message. Okay? And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's not important. Okay? Well, the truth is that we're not screwed. Okay? Actually, the medical research is crystal clear that there are very clear responses, okay, that have real life-changing benefits to people that are exposed to toxic stress. Okay? And the thing that the medical field is concentrating most on, what they are finding is the most important protective factor is hope. Okay? The medical field is now investing all kinds of resources to figure out ways to measure hope, what undermines hope, what creates hope, what develops hope. Okay? And the interesting thing is what they found is the most important in young people's lives for the development of hope. They know? It's a combination of both. Somebody said love, somebody said relationships. Okay? What they found is loving relationships, right? Okay. Yes, okay, what they found is that the most important factor in the lives of young people for responding to toxic stress and building hope is caring adults. Okay? And the more caring adults that are in their life, the more likely that hope builds. The fewer caring adults that are in a young person's life, the more likely that hope is under attack. Does this shock anybody? Right? No, we know what to do. Okay? We just choose not to do it. Okay? Now, I like the word hope because I'm an English teacher. And hope's a dynamic word. So if you look up hope in the dictionary, you'll find it's both a noun and a verb, which means it's both a thing. Right? We can actually name and identify hope as a thing, but it's also an action. It's something that we have to engage in. It's something that we have to do, okay, with young people and with each other. Now, as I said, the research community has become really interested in hope. So in psychology, you got this dude named Charles Snyder who's developed this thing called hope theory. And he actually has something called the Children's Hope Scale. Okay, I actually use the Children's Hope Scale in my high school classroom to measure changes in hope in the young people that I work with over time. My favorite definition of hope comes from a social epidemiologist at UC Berkeley. His name's Lynn Simon. He defines hope as a sense of control of destiny, okay? Which is why I signed up to teach. I signed up to teach to give the young people in my community a greater sense of control over their own destiny. So for every parent in here, what you should be demanding from schools is that they are able to measure the degree to which the educators that are working with your children raise the hope levels in the young people that they're serving. And it is measurable. Okay? And what that will do is raise your child's test scores. Okay? We have clear evidence that there is a direct link between raised levels of hope and performance in school. Okay? What we also know is that the raised levels of hope are the precondition to raised levels of performance in school. Okay? And if you talk to any researcher, what they'll tell you is you don't measure the outcome, you measure the conditions that lead to the outcome. Okay? Which means that we need to start insisting that schools are not measuring how our kids perform. What they're measuring is how they're prepared to perform. Okay? The performance measurements will take care of themselves. We got to start spending more time in connecting to the actual practices that will raise achievement and engagement in our kids. Okay? And there's nothing out of the research, okay, that seems to be more profoundly affecting that than hope. Okay? And look, I'll tell you straight up, like a lot of teachers, a lot of your best teachers would love to be measured on the amount of hope that they bring into kids' lives. Because it's what they signed up to do anyway. It's like, finally, like I'm going to be actually evaluated on the shit I signed up to do. Okay? Okay. Last, right, we find the concept of hope in all of our cultures. Right? So I don't care who you come from. I don't care who your people are. Right? If you trace back to your indigeneity, if you trace back, right, to your original land and your original language, what you will find is the same thing that I find in my own antepasados, in my own sangre, in my own historical past. Right? So my people are from the Mexica. Right? And you all will probably not know much of anything about the Mexica unless you've taken Raza Studies classes. Right? But the Mexica were the indigenous people of the northern portion of what you now know to be Mexico. Right? And this is where you get the name Mexico. Mexica is spelled M-E-X-I-C-A. Okay? So it's not Mexica. Okay? We say the X like a C-H. Okay? So the Mexica, right, when the Spaniards came, right, and they saw that the indigenous people, right, identified themselves as the Mexica, this is where you get the name Mexico. Okay? And in the southern half of that area was a group known as the Mayans, okay, who my people also descend back to. Right? And the Mayans, their core principle for raising the young people in their communities was this concept, in la Kesh. Right? And if you've been following the Raza Studies struggle in Tucson, right, you'll know that that was the first and core principles that they would teach their high school kids in their program. Okay? In la Kesh. And what it means is, it's this belief that the Mayans had that every time you come across another living being, that you are looking at a smoking mirror. Okay? And if you clear the smoke from the mirror, what will you see? You will see yourself. Okay? And this was the core principle for raising children in the Mayan community. Right? If you work with kids from Mexico, Latin and South America, okay, this is their indigenous tradition. Right? This is what their communities actually taught them. Right? That you are my other self. Right? Now the question is not whether or not when I look at you, if I'm seeing a smoking mirror. The question is back on me. Do I have the courage and the character and the integrity to take the time to clear the smoke away so that I can see myself? Right? It's not on the person, it's not on the other side of the mirror, it's on you. Right? It's on us as educators. Right? Can we take and look, okay, I've been teaching 20 years. Okay? I teach 11th graders. Okay? There are times when there is way more smoke between us than other times. Okay? And I can actually name where that smoke comes from sometimes. Okay? That's not the question. Right? The question is, am I going to have the character and the courage and the integrity to clear that smoke away so that I can see myself in that child? Because you see, when you see yourself in that child, you can't expel that child. You can't suspend that child. You can't send that child out of class. You can't flunk that child. You got to find a way. Well, that's the core principle that all of us in this room come from. And the problem in this country is that we've got away from our own indigenous identity. We've lost track of who we really are. Okay? And as a result of that, we've lost track of the fact of all the ways in which we're really connected. And so what we've learned to celebrate is difference. Okay? Instead of understanding, right, that difference is actually what connects us. Right? We've used it as an explanation about why we're not connected. Now, in the article and in the talk at Harvard, I talk about forms of false hope that I see peddled in schools all the time. Okay? And I encourage you to become aware of those because I see them in schools all the time. And so teachers will tell you that they are trying to build hope in your kids, and they're actually undermining hope. Okay? And it's not deliberate. Right? A lot of times it's their own lack of training. It's their own lack of support. Right? But it's still happening nonetheless, and it's still hurting our kids. What I want to spend the rest of our time today is focusing on real things that teachers can do, real things that parents can advocate that teachers do with their children, that according to the best of the research we have, has the greatest impact on kids, all kids. Okay? Not just high-need kids, but all kids. But the truth is that wealthier kids oftentimes already get this. Okay? And that's why they're doing better in school. So the first of these forms of critical hope is what I call material hope. And this is first and foremost insisting that every year, every child has an excellent teacher. Okay? Base standard. Right? And right now, we know we don't have that. Okay? And that's a problem. Right? That we've got to start wrapping our heads around. So really, both teachers and families and school communities generally, right? The primary focus should be on improving classroom practice. But that won't be enough. Okay? That we're also going to have to increase the material resources that we make available for kids. Right? I see all the time, teachers in the room, I see all the time, teachers ask kids to come after school. Right? You need to get some extra help, and just really show me you're dedicated. Okay? And so that kid comes after school, and they put in that work, and then that work is done, and you walk off to your car, and you hop in your whip, and you go to your suburb house, or your gated community, or your house around the corner, wherever it is that you go, and you leave that kid to get home on their own. Okay? Do you know why kids leave together after school? There is safety in numbers. Okay? You stay after school, okay, and you live in the kind of community that I live in, right? You're a mark, right? You're isolated, right? You're by yourself, and the risk level goes way up. Okay? Now, if you're doing that calculus, is it worth it? What's more important, your physical safety or changing your D to a C in chemistry? Okay? Yeah, she says, I'm going home. Right? And that's the calculus our kids have to do all the time. It's not that they don't want to do better in school. Right? It's that if I stay after school, I'm exposed to a whole nother level of risk. And like, I want to do better in chemistry. Right? But that's a rough calculus. Okay? So if you get a kid after school, right, when it's over, ride their ass home. Okay? Put them in the car. Right? And, oh yeah, it's a contract violation because it's unsafe. Okay? Look, if you don't like cursing, plug your ears right now. Okay? Because all I got to say about that is f*** your contract. Okay? Because what you have with me and my community is you have a social contract, which trumps your union contract. Okay? Read Rousseau. Okay? I'm schooled in the Europeans too. Okay? Right? And Rousseau writes about the social contract, which trumps all formal legal contracts. You have a social contract with me and my family and my community to provide safe passage to my children. Okay? I don't mind if you keep them after school, but if you're going to keep them after school, you got to treat them like it's your own child. Okay? Which means you got to make sure not just that they get back to the block, so please don't roll them up to the block and then pop the door open, kick them to the curb and be like, deuces, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay? No, no, no. Park the whip. Get out of the car and go meet the cousin on the corner who you are really deep down really afraid of. Okay? And then walk up in the housing project. I mean, you got some nice houses over here. Right? But walk up to the house, right? Walk up to the apartment, right? And meet grandma, meet mom, meet auntie, meet cousin. Get a free meal. Because we ain't got much else to offer you. Okay? But we will offer you some food, right, for taking care of our children. Right? And as educational leaders in the room, right, you have a responsibility to protect the teachers that are doing that. Okay? Instead of punishing them and talk about risk factors and all these other things, right, if you're an educational leader, you got to start banging on policy. You got to start allowing teachers to be able to have the right and the accessibility to be able to do that in a way that doesn't threaten their job. Okay? Now, when we start doing these kinds of things, okay, it starts closing the gap between what kids need the most and what we're offering them in school. Okay? But this ain't nothing new, y'all. In 1943, Abraham Maslow released the hierarchy of needs. Okay? This is now widely used across multiple fields, okay, as a basic principle for human development. Okay? And what Maslow said and what folks now agree on is that, look, if you want to get to here, you got to have that. And if you want to have that, you got to have that. And if you want to have that, you got to have that. Okay? So here's what we know. Okay? According to the best of what we have in the research, the most successful kids in school self-actualize. Right? They study on their own. Right? They motivate themselves. They motivate others. Right? So this is what we want. We want students that self-actualize. Right? If you want students that self-actualize, that's what you got to do. No test prep. Okay? No new notebooks. Okay? No new strategy for organizing your notes. Okay? The kids that are not self-actualizing, there's no silver bullet. Okay? It's basic shit. Okay? It's basic, y'all. Right? And everybody knows this. The kids that do best in school are the ones that have the most stability under them. Right? So if they're not doing well in school, work down. And I guarantee you the kids that are doing the worst in school, one, if not multiple of these is under threat. Food, clothing, shelter, safety. Okay? You want that kid to start doing better in school, don't send them to tutoring. Get that fixed. Tutoring ain't going to change it. If you hungry, right, seeing a tutor ain't going to cure the hunger. Right? It might actually exacerbate it. Okay? Once you got that, okay, once your kids, right, that those things are underneath them, then check this. Is there a sense of love and belonging in their life? Right? Not just at the house. Most of us get that pretty solid at the house. And then we walk out the door. Okay? And that fight starts. Right? Once you get that, then kids' esteem starts getting jacked up. Right? They start really feeling a lot better about themselves. Okay? And once that esteem gets in place, right, they start self-actualizing. Then you ain't got to sweat the kid about their homework. Because they're doing it on their own. Right? The second thing, the second form of hope, right, that I talk about is what I call a Socratic hope. And this is an idea I borrow from Cornel West. Right? And Cornel West says young people don't want to hear a sermon. They want to see one. Right? So let's be clear about the fact that the way we live our lives is an important instructional technique. Now, the way I think about this is the gap between being loved and being liked. Okay? And the problem, as Lisa Delpit points out in her book, Other People's Children, is that too many teachers working in our community see the kids as other people's children. Okay? And other people's children can fail. Other people's children can be kicked out of class. Right? But if that's really your son or daughter, right, the response system changes. Now, when I think about my mother, right, when I think about being 16, I did not like my mother when I was 16. Okay? And I did not like my mother because she used to make me do things that I frankly didn't think I should have to do, like clean my room or take a shower. Okay? And I remember one time I came in after practice and I dropped my bag, right? And my mother's like, "Boy, you stink, go take a shower." I'm like, dang, Mom, could I just have a second? Could I maybe get in and put my feet up for a second? Relax? She stops me mid-rant. And she says, son, I don't care if you like me, because I love you. And I'm going to be in your life forever. You stink. Go take a shower. And so I went upstairs, right? I'm taking a shower, and I'm cursing my mom. Man, she's always on me. I can't stand this house. It's so oppressive. Right? And in those moments, I did not like my mother, but I always loved her. And you see, this is the problem that we have in schools right now, is we got so many teachers teaching our kids that are outsiders to our community. And when you're an outsider, you become conflict averse. That's the nature of the outsider. They don't want no beef with nobody, because then they get exposed as the outsider. So they just keep it cool. They just want to be friends with our kids. Our kids don't need any more friends. They need teachers. And it's a small clap. And you see, the problem with this is that we're genuinely dishonest about love in this country. That we talk about love with this Disneylandish sensibility, this Peter Panish sensibility. In that love, if you really in love, then you don't have any conflict. But in fact, love is not the absence of conflict. Love is the presence of conflict, and the courage and the conviction and the integrity to move through that conflict. And the truth is, most of us can't even pull that off in one relationship in our life. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to show you what that reason is right now. How many of you, by show of hands, have ever had a personal relationship go bad? Okay. You see, there's 120 people in here. There's 119 people telling the truth, one liar. It's okay, bro. You're on the camera. We didn't expect to raise. Okay, there we go. All right. 120 out of 120. All right. So, I did this talk. I was telling the principals earlier today. I did this talk in Austin, Texas, and you can imagine how I go over in Texas. But it was for all of their teachers in the district. It's like 1,000 teachers. There's this huge auditorium, and they had these mics set up down the rows. And I asked that question. It was like 999 people, raised their hand, And this one woman, she was sitting right in the aisle, and she reaches over and grabs a mic, and she goes, yeah, and he's right there. And I was like, go ahead. This will be way more interesting than anything I have to say. Right? Y'all want to see some trauma? Go ahead. Right? So, I'm talking about that relationship where you got your heart stomped out. I'm talking about the relationship that made you fundamentally doubt love. That one. After you got hurt, who paid for your pain? Oh, see, now a lot less honest now. Nobody. I took it all myself. Right. Apparently yours is fairly closely happened. You see what she started? She goes, my sister, my brother, my auntie. You reliving it right now, huh? It's all right. I'm going to give you some hope at the end of the talk. It's going to be all good. So, right. The people around you, right? And the one that probably caught it the worst was your next relationship. Right? And we even have a term for it in our society. It's called a rebound. Right? And the reason for that is because your natural human instinct is to protect yourself. Right? And so if you just got your heart stomped out, right, you don't move into that next relationship and be like, I know we just met a few minutes ago, but could we get married? Right? You're not doing that. Right? You're going to that next relationship at arm's length. Right? Because you don't want to get hurt again. And if that relationship lasts, it's because that person says, that's all right. I got baggage too. Okay? And you can bring your baggage and we'll carry mine and we'll carry it together and we're going to unpack that baggage and we're going to make it through. Okay? And if you are in a relationship that has lasted, it's not because you're in a relationship with somebody that has no baggage. It's because you're in a relationship with somebody who worked through your baggage with you and you worked through their baggage with them. Okay? And the truth of the matter is, That is incredibly difficult work, y'all. Right? But that's what we signed up to do. That every kid that comes to us has some baggage. And we have some baggage. And if we're not willing to work through that baggage, then we ain't going to build loving relationships. There's going to be conflict. The question is whether or not we'll stay the course. And that is incredibly difficult work. And that, y'all, is why teachers drink. Yeah, she's like, shit, it's Friday at 6:30. Hey, you need to wrap this up. Where's my flask? So, the third kind of hope, right, is what I call audacious hope. Okay? And this means that we're willing to embrace that baggage. We know that kids are going to come to us in that way, and we're also going to allow ourselves to be exposed to that risk every day. Because to be in love, y'all, is perhaps the highest risk human behavior. Okay? Because it means to put yourself at risk all the time, every day, to get your heart stomped out with no guarantee of protection. Okay? That's what it means to love, unconditionally, as Pac said. Right? And unconditional love is the highest risk behavior. Okay? And to do that with 150 kids, right, every single year, is incredibly difficult work, and you better be audacious if you're going to try and pull that off. Now, the way we think about it, okay, is by thinking about developing schools and classrooms as micro-ecosystems. What I've talked about to this point is a meta-ecosystem, okay, a broader society that is largely unhealthy. We do not control that. We're not going to change that today. We're not going to end racism. We're not going to end poverty. We're not going to end all these things that we're talking about. Right? But we can dig where we stand. Right? So wherever it is that you stand, start digging. Understand that you can create a micro-ecosystem there that is responsive to the meta-ecosystem that we're dealing with. Right? Now, in 20 years, y'all, I've never had a perfect year. I've never had a perfect semester. I've never had a perfect marking period. I've never had a perfect unit. I've never had a perfect week. I've never had a perfect day. I've never had a perfect class period. Ever in 20 years. But every day I wake up expecting to, knowing that I won't. And that is why I drink. Water, kids, water. I stay hydrated. Right? So I'm going to end, right, with what I think is a concrete example about what I mean by critical hope. Right? And it comes from Maya Angelou. But next to her, sort of juxtaposed to that picture, I have a book called Black Youth Rising by my friend and colleague Sean Jenwright. Right? And what I like Sean's work a lot, otherwise I wouldn't have it up there, but I'm particularly interested in his subtitle, which you probably can't read. It's right down under here. Right? And he uses the term radical healing. And what I believe the best teachers in our community is radical healers. Okay? That's the thing that raises achievement the most. Right? Not just a commitment to healing, but an understanding about how radical the conditions of the concrete are. An acknowledgement that to respond to radical conditions as a healer means that you have to provide radical responses. If you're going to play it safe, then you're not going to have the kind of impact you want to have as a teacher. Right? And so as families, as community members, and as educational leaders, we've got to do a better job of encouraging and supporting teachers to be more radical in the ways that they engage with our kids, okay? In the ways that they engage with this system. And right now, so many teachers get profoundly punished for engaging in the very things that I'm talking about today. Okay? And that's a community responsibility. We got to do a much better job of rallying behind our teachers and our administrators to support them to do this work. Okay? Now, what happens when we do, okay, is reflected in this video I'm going to show you from Maya, which I think is precisely what I mean by this idea of critical hope.
I'm was doing his movie, Poetic Justice. And he asked, would I come out to Los Angeles and do a cameo? I walked out of my trailer that morning, and there was one young man cursing, like you could see the blue come out of his mouth. And then he and another fellow, they were at each other's throat. They had each other's clothes. So I went up to one young man and I said, excuse me, may I speak to you? He said, I wouldn't give, I said, I understand that. But may I speak to you for a minute? He said, if these moves, I said, I've heard that before. But do you know how important you are? Do you know that our people slept in spoon fashion in the filthy ashes of slave ships, in their own and in each other's excrement and urine and menstrual flow, so that you could live 200 years later? Do you know that? Do you know that our people stood on auction blocks so that you could live? He said, that's never been asked. When's the last time anyone told you how important you are? And he started the tears started to come out. I had no Kleenex or anything, so I just wiped his face with my hands and talked to him. And Miss Janet Jackson came. She said, Angela, I don't believe you actually talked to Tupac Shakur. So I didn't know Tupac Shakur. I didn't know Six Pack. Because in my life and my age group, you understand, I didn't know that. Tupac's mother wrote me a letter. She said her son had called her right after I had spoken to him. And she wanted to thank me. She said, you may have saved his life. And I thank you, Dr. Angela.
In that one story, she painted a more human picture of him than the entire media did during his career, you know. People were afraid of Tupac. The media made him like he was a scary thing. And she talked about him like he was a young man in a confusing and difficult situation. And that's kind of what I like about Dr. Angela. Because I know I'm not perfect and whatever, but it's something that she can look at me and she can kind of put the picture together. She knows I'm just a dude trying to figure it out.
Each of us has a chance to be somebody. And it's my delight that you would ask for me so that I can have the pleasure, the joy, the thrill of talking to you so that I can be somebody.
Wow. Yeah. That's master pedagogy. Right? That's great teaching. And I want to point out a couple things about what Maya did. Okay. First of all, she's Maya. Right? So she's a Nobel Prize nominee in literature. She's a national treasure. She's a grandma. Okay? And she's on a movie set. She walks out of the trailer, right, and she sees two young men about to fight. Okay? Don't picture Tupac, because that's not who she sees, is it? She doesn't even know Tupac. She doesn't know Six Pack. Right? So she just sees two young men. Right? What possesses her to run and break up that fight? Nobel Peace Prize nominee, grandmother on a movie set. Call security, Maya. Now somebody interviewing her asked her that question. And I swear when I saw that happen, I thought she was going to go upside dude's head. Like she looked at him like he was outside his mind. What she says is, how could I not? How could I not intervene in those young men's lives? If I don't intervene there, I'm already dead. Spiritually, emotionally, morally, if I can't intervene in the lives of my own sons, what's going on, right? But we see all the time in schools, right, that teachers, grown folks, will not intervene in kids' lives. Right? And of course, the impact, according to, and let's be clear, when she intervenes, what's Pac's reaction? Right? Yeah, he's not like, oh, thank God I didn't really want to fight dude anyway. Or you're Maya. Oh. No, he goes back again. He's disrespectful. And what's her response to his disrespect? Go again. His response. Disrespect. Her response. I'm not going anywhere. You understand this? Right? You understand how important you are. Right? Now, because Maya intervenes in Pac's life, according to Pac's mother, saved his life. Now, because she saves his life, Pac goes on to do an interview, okay, about 2 months before he dies. And in the interview, he says, the interviewer asks him, what do you think will be the impact of your music? Right? He says, I don't know. He says, well, do you think it'll change the world? He says, no. I don't think that my music will change the world, but I guarantee it'll spark the mind that does. And that's kind of how I think about my teaching. Right? I don't think I'm going to change the world in P7 at Fremont High in East Oakland. But there's something about those kids that suggests to me that they just might. Right? Now, because Maya intervenes around 1993, Pac goes on to live until 1996. Okay? And that period was the most productive period in his writing. Okay? And as a result of those extra 3 years in his life, Pac completes an album called Resurrection, which gets released in 2003. In 2009, my homie snapped this photo all the way across the world in Kathmandu in front of one of the largest Buddhist shrines in the world. Okay? And this is a photo of 3 brothers. The oldest brother in the middle, the middle brother on the right, the youngest on the left. And the middle brother, the one on the right here, is weeping. You can see his hand is on his head. Okay? And the oldest brother is consoling him. And the youngest brother is watching, learning empathy. And what you might not catch about the photo, okay, is that the youngest brother or the oldest brother is wearing the album shirt from Tupac's Resurrection. Okay? And this is the part that we lose track of when we work with young people. Right? That when you change lives, it ripples across oceans. Right? It's not always measurable in a test score. We're not always going to see immediate outcome and impact from deeply caring about children. Right? You have to trust that if you love kids enough, if you care for kids enough, that they will spread that healing, right, throughout the community. Now I'm going to end by saying this. The problem that I have with Pac's narrative is it's still a narrative of rugged individualism. The single rose that grows up through the concrete. Okay? I was that rose. And they see me in the concrete. And what do you do when you see a rose in the concrete? You pluck it. So they plucked me up out the concrete and they took me over to the rose garden known as UC Berkeley. And they dropped me down. And they said, there you go, Rose. Don't you feel so much better now? You're in the rose garden. Okay? And low-key, I did. I was like, wow, y'all have a library with books that I can touch. Okay? And this is like a real school. And then it took me all of one semester to realize that while I was in the rose garden, that I was a rose of a different color. Okay? And nobody really told me in school what that rose garden was going to be like. They just said, oh, you ready for the rose garden now? And so I flunked all my classes. Okay? And I was ready to drop out. First in my family to go to a major university. I couldn't call home and be like, what do I do when I'm flunking my Econ 1 class? Right? I was on my own. Okay? And so I was ready to drop out until a professor named Harry Edwards didn't even know me. Okay? I didn't have that dude's class, nothing. He heard about what was going on with me on a campus of 32,000 students. Okay? And he insists on meeting with me, 17-year-old scrub freshman. Why does he want to meet with me? Okay? And what he did in that meeting with me is he basically broke down everything for me that I've been trying to break down for you here tonight. Okay? And I left that meeting and I wept. I cried. Because it was the first time in my life that anybody had really told me the truth about what school was doing to me and why it made me feel the way that I felt. And I wept because I was angry, that I felt like I had been lied and cheated to all along the way. And what Edwards told me was this. He said that your job here in this rose garden is different than other people's job in this rose garden. Your job in this rose garden is to fill your pockets with soil and water and light and the knowledge that is the righteous knowledge of your own people. And then your job is to go back to the concrete. Because back in that concrete, there's still a crack. And underneath that concrete, there's a whole nother group of roses that's growing up. And if that group of roses has to crack through the concrete in the same way you did, then we have made no progress. But if you can go back to that concrete, lucky thing about growing up in the concrete is the city's always slow to fix cracks. Okay? So you can come back 5 weeks later or 5 years later, and the crack will still be there. Right? And then you drop down in that crack, and you hold that crack open, and you dump out the soil and the water and the light. And you scratch yourself all over again, and you cut yourself up all over again, and you damage your petals all over again, so that next group of roses can come up through that concrete with fewer damaged petals. And then you tell those roses this same damn thing, that I'm not doing this for you so that you can escape the hood. I never understood that, why school would tell me that I need to escape my own people, that I need to escape my own family, that I need to escape my own cousin on the corner. Why wasn't school teaching me ways to change the block instead of escape the block? This is why so many young people reject school, because they don't want to leave the community. We don't want to leave our families. We want to find a way to be successful in school and change our communities and still be able to live on our block in safety. Right? And the fact that we have to choose is a real problem that's perpetuated by the ways that schools define success. Right? When we start to change the way we define success, when we start telling kids that it's okay for you to go away to come back, and that the concrete, that we'll hold it open while you're gone, but we need you back here to help us grow these roses. At that point, then we'll stop looking at individual roses in the concrete, and we'll start seeing rose gardens in the community. Thank you.